The cold wind blew hard across Wyoming like a sharp knife, carried the cold of another bad winter. Marcus Stone stood on his ranch house porch, looking at the red sunset behind the tall mountains. At 32, he was the richest rancher for miles around. He owned 5,000 acres of land and more cattle than most men could dream of. His house was full of nice things from Denver. Beautiful rugs, fancy lamps, and books with leather covers. But none of these things made the sad feeling in his chest go away. It had been 3 years since a fever killed Emma, his wife, and little Thomas, his son. 3 years since he buried them on the hill behind the trees. He threw himself into work, making his ranch bigger and stronger. He tried to run away from the quiet that filled every room of his big house. But as the shadows grew long across the land, Marcus knew he wasn't running anymore. He was stuck, haunted by memories. Mr. Stone. A shy voice brought him back. He turned and saw her in the doorway. Rose Miller, the new maid who came 3 weeks ago from Ohio. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old. Her light brown hair was pulled back neat, her gray eyes looking down like she was afraid to look at him. She held her shawl tight around her shoulders. Her plain brown dress made her look even smaller. "Yes, Miss Miller. Supper's ready, sir. Mrs. Johnson said to tell you it's beef stew tonight with fresh bread." Marcus nodded but didn't move to go inside. Rose shifted from one foot to the other, nervous like a scared rabbit. "Will you eat in the dining room, sir, or?" Her voice faded into the cold air. "The study," Marcus said at last. "I have books to look at." "Yes, sir." She gave a small bow and went back inside. He stayed on the porch, watching the first stars come out. He wondered why this shy maid, who barely talked above a whisper, stayed in his thoughts. Maybe it was her quiet way, like his own loneliness. Maybe it was how she moved around the house, doing her work but trying to stay invisible, like she was scared to take up space. Inside, the fire crackled in the study as Marcus sat at his big oak desk. Shelves of books lined the walls, though he rarely read them. Numbers filled his nights instead. Lists of cattle sales, land buys, money made. Having money meant control. Money meant no one could take what little he had left. Rose came in with a tray. She moved carefully, setting down the hot bowl of stew, bread wrapped in cloth, and a glass of water. Her hands shook a little as she placed each thing just right, like the smallest mistake would bring trouble. "Thank you," Marcus said. She nodded quickly and turned to leave, but her eyes caught the picture above his desk. Emma in her wedding dress, holding baby Thomas, the only soft thing left in that room of hard wood and firelight. "You had a beautiful family, sir," Rose said softly, then bit her lip like she had said something wrong. "They were," he answered simply. Rose turned red and slipped out, closing the door behind her. Marcus ate without tasting. His eyes kept moving from the picture to the closed door. That night, he worked until midnight, writing numbers on endless pages. But as he walked upstairs to his room, a quiet sound stopped him. A voice, soft and low, coming from the kitchen. He moved quietly down the hall, stopping outside the door. There she was, washing dishes under the lamplight, her back to him. She was talking not to anyone, but like the words inside her had to come out into the empty room. "Tomorrow, I'll dust the front room extra well," she said quietly. "Mr. Stone doesn't use it much, but it should be clean. And I'll polish the silver again, even if Mrs. Johnson says once a week is enough. Such nice silver, worth more than Papa's store ever was." Her voice shook, her shoulders moving slightly. She gripped the edge of the washbowl. "No crying, Rose Ann," she whispered to herself. "You're lucky to have this roof, these wages. Some girls end up worse. Mr. Stone is fair even if he looks so sad. Those eyes like he's looking at ghosts." Marcus's chest got tight. He stepped back into the shadows. Ghosts. That's what she saw in him, what he had become. The next night, he waited in his study. This time, he let the fire burn low, sat back in his chair, loosened his collar, and closed his eyes. To anyone coming in, he would look like a man sleeping after a long day's work. The door opened with a creak. Rose's light steps crossed the floor. She stopped at his desk, gathering dishes onto her tray. Then she came closer. Marcus felt the touch of soft hands as she pulled the blanket from his chair and put it gently over him. "Poor man," she whispered. "Working yourself to death won't bring them back." "I know. I tried it myself." Marcus almost opened his eyes, but he stayed still, breathing steady. Rose moved to the fireplace, making the dying fire burn again. She stopped at the picture. "You had a beautiful family, Mr. Stone," she said softly. "I hope you find peace someday. The way you look at them when you think no one's watching, it breaks my heart. I know what it's like to lose everything, but you're still here, still breathing. That must count for something." She turned to go, stopping one last time beside his chair. "Sleep well, sir. Tomorrow's a new day." The door closed with a gentle click. Marcus sat still, the warmth of the fire coming back into the room, but his thoughts burning hot. This shy girl who hid in quiet during the day carried a deep heart he had not expected. And her kindness, the blanket, the fire, the words had broken through the cold wall he had built around his heart. For the first time in years, Marcus Stone wondered about tomorrow. The days that followed only made Marcus more curious. Every evening after supper, he left the dishes on his desk, loosened his collar, and settled into his chair like sleep had taken him. And every night, just past 11, Rose came. Sometimes she talked to herself as she cleaned, soft thoughts about chores, about how the front room curtains caught the sunlight, about her mother's lessons in keeping house. Sometimes she just moved quietly, her touch gentle as she added wood to the fire or fixed his blanket. But every night, without fail, she stopped at the picture of Emma and Thomas. On the third night, she placed a small tin on the side table. "Your hands, Mr. Stone," she whispered, touching the tin. "They're cracked from the cold. Mama used to make this salve from beeswax and herbs. I hope you don't mind. I thought maybe it would help." Marcus's throat got tight. He wanted to thank her, to tell her he wasn't asleep, but something held him back. He didn't want to break the magic. Not yet. By the fifth night, Rose's voice had grown more open. "Mrs. Johnson says you built all this with your own hands," she said quietly, wiping down his already clean desk. "Papa would have liked that. He always said America was where a man could make himself into anything. Of course, he said that about his money ideas too. And we all know how that ended." Her voice cracked and she quickly added, "Still, I'm grateful for this place. Some girls on the train with me weren't so lucky. One went to a dance hall in Denver. She cried the whole last day, knowing what kind of job it was. That could have been me if not for you." Marcus made fists under the blanket. How had he never noticed before how much strength this shy girl carried in her small body? But on the seventh night, everything changed. Rose came in as usual, carrying her tray, but her steps were unsteady. Her face was red in the firelight and shiny with sweat. She set the tray down with shaking hands and swayed. "Just a little fever," she whispered. "Finish the chores, Rose. Don't be weak." When she stumbled, Marcus could no longer pretend. He jumped forward, catching her before she fell. "Miss Miller!" His voice startled her. Her gray eyes went wide with shock and shame. "You were awake," she gasped. "All this time you knew?" "You're burning up," Marcus said, holding her steady. "You shouldn't be on your feet." "I'm fine," she said weakly. "Please don't trouble Mrs. Johnson. If she thinks I can't work—" "Sit," Marcus ordered, helping her into the chair across from his own. His voice meant no arguing. Soon Mrs. Johnson arrived. Her sharp eyes took one look at Rose before clicking her tongue. "Fever. I knew you looked pale at supper." Rose shrank into herself. "I didn't want to be trouble." "Trouble," the housekeeper snapped. "Girl, nearly working yourself into the grave isn't a kindness to anyone." Marcus's jaw got tight. "Send Billy for Dr. Carter. Now." Mrs. Johnson blinked. "At this hour? For a servant's fever." "For one of my people," Marcus said firmly. "Send him." Rose's cheeks burned. "You must think me foolish, talking to you while you pretended to sleep, saying all those things." Marcus's look softened. Not foolish, kind, kinder than I deserved. She looked down, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. The doctor came an hour later, grumbling about midnight calls. After looking at Rose, he straightened with a sigh. Tired out, too thin, overworked herself. Nothing rest and good food won't cure. She'll live if she stays in bed. He gave Marcus a long, knowing look. Strange to see you so worried about a maid, Stone. But good to see you care about something beyond cattle and ledgers again. When Rose was settled in her small room, Marcus stayed, looking at the little tin of salve she had made for him. A maid with nothing to her name had noticed his pain and tried to help it. The act humbled him. For 3 days, Rose stayed in bed by his order, despite her protests. She worried about lost work, about being trouble, about losing her job. Girl doesn't understand kindness, Mrs. Johnson said. Been kicked too many times to expect anything else. On the 4th day, Marcus knocked gently on her door. Rose sat propped on pillows, sewing despite being weak. At the sight of him, she tried to get up, but he waved her back. How are you feeling? He asked, pulling a chair close. Much better, sir. I'll be back to work tomorrow. I promise. You'll return when Dr. Carter says you're ready. Not before. He paused, then took a breath. I owe you an apology. Rose's brow wrinkled. For what? For tricking you, pretending to sleep, listening when I should not have. She turned bright red. Then you heard everything. Everything, he admitted. Oh, how embarrassing, she whispered, covering her face. Not embarrassing, he said softly. Eye-opening. Rose, your kindness reminded me that simple caring still exists in this world. You've done more for me in a few weeks than wealth or land ever could. Her eyes shone with tears. I know what loss feels like, Mr. Stone. I only wanted you not to feel so alone. He reached for her hand, his voice low and rough. You'll do no more scrubbing floors. When you're well, I'd like you to be head maid. Better wages, easier duties. You've earned it. Her lips opened in shock. But I've only been here 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, you've shown more heart than most do in a lifetime. He got up to leave, but she stopped him with a whisper. Mr. Stone, were you truly awake every night? He allowed a small smile. Every night. She buried her face in her hands with a groan. But Marcus walked away with something stirring in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The storm that tested that hope came weeks later. A February blizzard rolled down from the mountains without warning, burying the valley in snow and howling winds. Marcus rode out to check the pregnant cows, but the storm hit faster than expected. Hours later, half frozen, he stumbled back to the ranch, his body more ice than flesh. The kitchen door flew open and Rose was there. Mr. Stone, she cried, her face white with fear. She caught his arm as he nearly fell, dragging him into the blessed warmth. His hands were white and waxy, nearly frozen. Rose knelt before him without hesitation, rubbing them between her own. Oh no, she whispered fiercely. Not you, not like this. Hold on. For the next hour, she and Mrs. Johnson fought to warm him, spooning hot soup past his chattering teeth, rubbing life back into his frozen arms and legs. When the pain came, a burning hurt as blood returned, Rose never let go of his hands. You're safe, she whispered, holding him close against her warmth. You're home. Sleep now. Marcus drifted into sleep with her voice keeping him safe. And when he woke, sunlight on his face, the first thing he saw was Rose sleeping in a chair by his bed, her hand still wrapped around his. For the first time since Emma and Thomas, Marcus Stone felt truly alive. Spring came slow that year, the snow melting into streams that cut through the Wyoming Valley, leaving the land fresh and green once more. The ranch bustled with new life, calves stumbling on shaky legs, wildflowers dotting the fields, and a sense of new beginnings in the air. For Marcus Stone, it was not just the land that was changing. It was his heart. He had lived too long in the shadow of sadness, closing himself off, believing no sunlight could ever reach him again. But Rose Miller had walked quietly into his house, into his life, and with her gentle hands and quiet words, she had broken through walls that wealth and work could never tear down. Every day he found himself seeking her presence. At first it was small things, asking her thoughts on the arrangement of flowers in the front room or staying a little longer when she brought tea. But soon it was more. One afternoon he found her mending a shirt by the window, her face lit by the warm glow of the sun. He stopped in the doorway, watching silently until she looked up. "Startled, Mr. Stone?" she asked, her cheeks turning red. "Marcus," he corrected softly. Her hands stopped on the fabric. "I couldn't. I shouldn't. You've cared for me more honestly than anyone has in years," he said, stepping closer. "If anyone has the right to call me by name, it's you." Her lips trembled, but she whispered, "Marcus." It was the sweetest sound he had heard in a long time. One evening, the valley gathered for a barn dance at a neighbor's ranch. Music filled the air, fiddles and laughter carrying across the night. Marcus stood at the edge of the crowd, his fine coat and boots marking him as the richest man there. Yet he felt strangely apart. That was until he saw Rose. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but in Marcus's eyes, she was the brightest star in the room. She stood off to the side, unsure, her hands held tight. A group of young men glanced her way, but none came over. She was too quiet, too guarded. Marcus crossed the floor without hesitation. "Miss Miller," he said, offering his hand. "Would you give me this dance?" Her eyes went wide. "Oh no, I couldn't. Everyone will stare. Let them." His voice was firm but kind. "Please." She hesitated, then slowly placed her hand in his. The music swelled and Marcus led her across the floor. At first, her steps were clumsy, her face red with nerves. But Marcus's steady hand guided her, and soon she was laughing, an open, joyous sound that turned every head in the barn. For a moment, Marcus felt the weight of his sadness lift, replaced by something new, something bright. When the song ended, the crowd clapped and Rose tried to pull away, but Marcus held her hand. "One more," he asked softly. She met his gaze, her gray eyes shining. "One more." But not everyone was happy. Whispers began to spread through town, the wealthy rancher and the maid. Folks said Rose was reaching above her place, that Marcus was blinded by loneliness. Some called her a gold digger. Rose heard the whispers in the market, felt the stares at church. She shrank beneath them, her old fears creeping back. One evening, she packed a small bag, planning to slip away before dawn. But when she opened the door, Marcus was already there, standing in the dim light of the hall. "You were leaving," he said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't bring shame to your name. People are talking. Let them talk." His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with feeling. "Rose, I've spent years living for what people thought, for looks, for respectability, and it left me empty. You brought me back to life. I won't lose that because of gossip." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You deserve someone your equal." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I already found her. My equal isn't measured in wealth or land. It's measured in heart. And Rose, yours is stronger than anyone I've ever known." Her breath caught, her body trembling. "Marcus." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Stay, please. Build a life here with me, not as a maid, as my partner, as my wife." Rose's tears turned to quiet sobs against his chest, but she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The wedding was small, held beneath the cottonwood trees where Emma and Thomas rested. Marcus spoke their names softly before the ceremony, asking their blessing. The wind stirred the branches gently, as if answering. Rose stood in a simple white dress, her hands trembling in his as they said their vows. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her with the promise of a new beginning. The valley would talk, of course, but Marcus no longer cared. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Rose, once a shy maid hiding her pain, now stood at his side as his equal, his partner, his love. Together, they faced the wide-open West, not as two broken souls, but as one. And in the quiet of the ranch house that night, Marcus whispered into the dark, "Tomorrow is a new day." Rose smiled, her head resting on his chest. "Yes," she said softly, "and this time we'll face it together."